Hi guys, my name is Natalie and this channel is Clarified. So I want to get right into it. Wanted to share a really interesting story from my past. We're going to call it BC days before Christ. I would say this was around age 17, probably somewhere in my last year, grade 12. It is possible I might have been in grade 11 when this happened, but it was kind of near the tail end of high school. So for those of you who don't know, I became a Christian when I was 18 years old. So prior to that, obviously, I believed in God, believed in the Bible, all of that, but I didn't have any kind of a personal relationship with God. And so this one day I was hanging out with a friend of mine, and this friend, he knew that I like to get really high on the weekends, to smoke a lot of marijuana, a lot of pot, and just have fun in that way. And he didn't understand that. This guy that I was friends with, he would drink maybe once a month, get really drunk, but he didn't understand at all, the pot smoking. And so one day as we were chatting, he's like, why do you do that? Why do you always get like on the weekends? Why do you always smoke pot? Like, why? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I love it. It's fun. And anyways, so this one day he tells me, he goes, you know what? I'm going to pray, and I'm going to pray that you are not able to get your hands on any pot this weekend. And when he said this, I burst out laughing. Like it was a very authentic LOL moment, laugh out loud. And the reason I laughed is because he didn't understand how easy it was for me to get my hands on pot. Now this would have been either 1994 or 1993. And so pot was illegal. It was criminal for any age. But I knew a lot of people who always had pot on them. I knew what I would call secondary dealers who got their marijuana from a higher source and kind of were like a mid-level dealer. I knew like 2 or 3 of them. And I happened to know one gentleman who was the top dealer for my area, so sorry, White Rock, who kind of gave it to the mid-level. So I knew a plethora of people. And so for me, at that point in my life, to get my hands on weed was pretty much at the same level that it would be today with it being legal, right? Like even though it was not legal, once you were in the know and you knew who had pot, where to get it, it was incredibly easy for someone like myself to get it. So when my friend said, I'm going to pray for you, I'm going to pray that you stay like that, you don't get high at all on Friday night or whatever it was, that, I'm going to pray that you're sober the whole night and that you can't get your hands on it. I laughed because I thought, saying to me that you're going to pray for me to not get high, to me was the equivalent of like praying that somehow I couldn't walk down the street to my local McDonald's and order a cheeseburger. Like it just seemed so ridiculous. And now I did believe in God, and I actually did believe, God created the universe. God has done some outstanding events in world history. For example, Mary conceiving Jesus or the parting of the Red Sea. And so I always thought that God was in the big picture moments of life. It never occurred to me that God would get involved, or I guess could get involved, or even care to get involved in something as minuscule as a person's individual life or choices. Like I didn't think that God cared or would get involved. And to be honest, like I didn't even think he kind of could get involved, because I thought the idea of me not getting pot was just laughable. And I look at it now as a Christian, and I realize that I, back then, as a non-Christian, was guilty of what Sarah did when she laughed at God. When she was at the tent and she was listening, there's a story in the Bible where God is speaking to Abraham in an audible voice, and Abraham is talking to God, and Abraham and his wife Sarah are very old, way past the capacity for Sarah to bear children. And God says, I'll definitely come back in a year and your wife Sarah will be pregnant. And Sarah hears this because God is speaking audibly in this moment, and she laughs, like she just laughs at God, at the idea of it, all of it. And, looking back on it now, I've been a Christian about 30 years. I recognize that's what I did. Like when my friend's like, yeah, I'll pray that God intervenes and you don't get your hands on some pot, I burst out laughing because I was laughing at the idea that God could stop me. Like, to me, it just seems so ridiculous. So let me tell you what happened on this night. So the next day, it's like Friday night, it's the weekend. And I remember my friend said, I'm going to pray really hard that you don't get your hands on marijuana. So I was like, yeah, good luck with that. So the next day I meet up with a bunch of friends and we go to someone's house and we're waiting like a block or two down, and we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting a really long time. And it kind of enters my head like the prayer, but I'm like, no, that's fine. Hiccups happen. Like, we just keep waiting. Finally, someone from our group that had left to see what was the holdup comes running back to us, breathless and in shock. And they said, oh my gosh, my friend whom we were going to get all this weed from, the RCMP just raided his home. They are literally ripping out all the pot plants. Like, he had a full operation in his basement. He had the lighting, the pot plants. Like I said, this was around 1993, 1994. None of this was legal. And it's being ripped out of his house, being put in massive garbage bags, like black Glad bags, and being hauled out. And so I was like, oh, okay. My first thought was not like, oh, God is on my tail, God is answering my friend's prayer. My first thought was like, well, that's what happens when you're a lawbreaker. This guy's a criminal. He, sells pot to teenagers and others, I'm sure. And he's got massive amounts of pot plants in his own house. And, like once in a while, you're going to get caught. Once in a while, the police is actually going to be good at their job. They're going to find you. They're going to shut you down. Like, doesn't mean that God is somehow arranging this. Like, this is just what happens when you're a criminal. The guy's a criminal. He got caught. Okay, whatever. So I didn't really take it as the beginning of like anything. I just rationalized in my mind, like, of course criminals get caught. Like, of course, it doesn't mean it's God. So, we leave there, of course, knowing that we're not going to get our hands anything from this particular guy. And we go down to the beach for a while. And a couple of our friends are like relaying, like running and making phone calls, running to like phone booths, making phone calls, trying to get a hold of pot for us to smoke, because I'm with a group of people, and like nothing is happening, nothing. So then now I'm more like, it's taking a while. Now, as the night goes on, we still can't get our hands on anything. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, I knew personally the person who was distributing marijuana for all the mid-level dealers. He was at the apex of the pyramid. Won't say his name just in case he's still alive. But anyways, so my friend says, let's just go to the source. Let's just go to his house. And we all agreed because we knew him, and we knew if anyone has pot on them, it's this guy, because he would supply all the high school kids. Like, he was the touch point for all of South Surrey White Rock at that time. So we go to his house. I don't know if he was renting or if it was his parents' home. Like, he was in his mid-20s, I would say. But he was staying in a home that was on Marine Drive on the Ocean Cliff side, like looking down at the waters, like a very expensive property. So we go there, and I thought, like, here we go. Like, knew it. I knew I was going to get my hands on pot. So we go into the house of like the kind of apex dealer of our area, and he's talking to one of our friends, and she comes back and tells me, she's like, oh, he's got nothing. And we look at her because this guy never has nothing. And so we say to her, we're like, no, you mean he's got nothing to sell, but he's got his own stash for him. Like, there's no way he's got nothing. And she repeats herself. She's like, no, he's got nothing. And we're like, yeah, nothing to sell. Like, of course he has a personal stash. Like, can he not share that with us? We will share, we'll pay top dollar. And she's like, no, he has nothing. He has nothing for himself even. And our brains are not even comprehending it. We're like, this guy's been high for years on end, This guy never does not have anything on him. And now we're told to believe that he has nothing, absolutely nothing, that his dealer, who is above him, has nothing. Okay, now I'm actually starting to think, okay, wait a minute. The dealer of all the other dealers in South Surrey White Rock has nothing. His dealer for him has nothing. A place got raided by the RCMP. And I'm starting to think, maybe God answered my friend's prayer. Like now, because I'm like, this guy, like if you didn't know him, you think he came out of the womb high, right? So I'm like, okay, maybe this is what's happening. So we eventually leave his house because he has nothing to give, nothing to share, nothing to sell. We end up hanging out in Ocean Park. There's like a Safeway in a parking lot, and there's a payphone because this is like before phones, so you have to rent a payphones and pagers and all that. So our group, we're getting desperate. It's about 11:15 p.m. and I had a midnight curfew, and I absolutely had to be home at midnight, and my parents were waiting for me. And all of a sudden it occurs to me that I didn't think of it at the time, but really I was like Jonah on the ship. I realized all of my crew here with me, they're all going to be stone cold sober, and it's my fault because so long as I'm in their company, nothing will they get their hands on. There's no way as long as I'm here. And then it's occurring me that I am ruining their night. And I'm sitting there realizing the gravity of it all, that God is answering my friend's prayer, that no weed is accessible to me, and anyone who's hanging around me this night because of me, no weed will be accessible for them. And now I'm really starting to believe it, that God has intervened, that he has parted the heavens, and his sole mission is to keep Natalie straight as an arrow and not allow me to get high. And I'm really understanding this now. And the time is clocking on, and it was about 11:30 p.m. I had to be home in 30 minutes. And I was chatting to one of the guys in my group, and I said, I just want to let you know, I have to leave at 11:55 because I lived in the area. So it was like a 5-minute walk home. I had to be home by midnight. I said, I have to leave at like 11:55 because I had to be home at midnight. And I said, the minute I leave you guys, I said, you'll find what you're looking for. And he looked at me, very weirdly. And he's like, what? And I said, the minute I leave this group, you will find what you're looking for. And he said, why do you say that? Like he thought that was the weirdest thing ever. And I didn't tell him why, because I said, you wouldn't believe it if I told you. And he's like, no, try me. Tell me why you say that. And I said, no, you would not believe me if I told you. So I didn't tell him. And he's like, well, I think you're wrong. Like, just hang in there. There's still some time left. And I said, but I'm telling you, my curfew is midnight. I'm walking home at 11:55. And I said, you're going to find nothing until I leave. And we just keep chit-chatting. And all of a sudden I look at my watch and it says 11:55. And I'm 5 minutes on foot from my house. And I said, okay, well, I got to go home. I said, I'll see you like whenever, right? And as soon as I said that, like, okay, well, I got to go, literally, because the group was still trying to acquire the marijuana. There was about 3 or 4 of them like hovering near the payphone at the Safeway. And just as I say, hey, I got to go home now, I hear someone shout out, we got it. And then I hear, woo, woohoo, like teens celebrating that they're going to get high. And I just said, like, told you. And then I walked home. And, I was pretty upset about that. Like, I was pretty upset. I remember seeing my friend, the one who prayed for me not to get my hands on pot, that I wouldn't get high on the weekend. And he asked me, he's like, how was your weekend? And I'm like, it sucked. Thanks for asking. And, and I was pretty mad. And I said, hey, FYI, don't ever pray for me again. Like, what, like, And he's like, you didn't get your hands on, like, he wasn't sure either. He's like, you didn't get your hands on any pot? I'm like, no, literally nowhere. No dealer, no human, no one had pot plants, like no. And I said, don't ever pray for me again. Like, I was ticked off. But at the same time, this was a very pivotal day for me as a non-Christian. Like I said, I had not come to that place of an authentic encounter with God. And yet, even as a non-Christian, like I said, I believed in God. I had all the cognitive beliefs, but I didn't have the relationship. From that moment onwards, I was amazed, and I knew, even at that moment, that God was able to get into my business, that God was totally able to get into the nitty-gritty of my life. And I also realized in that moment that God was actually interested in my life, interested in how I spent my Friday nights, interested in the minutia of it, what I did on my weekends. Like, it never really occurred to me. I didn't think of myself like, oh, I'm some historical person like Mary or Joseph or David, that God is going to like intervene and like get involved in my life, get involved in my Friday night. And when this all went down and finished going down, I realized that God was so powerful that he could get involved in the most common thing of my life. Because for me, just to remind you, even though pot was illegal at that time, for me, getting my hands on a joint was as easy, and I'm not even exaggerating, as it would have been for you to walk into a coffee shop and buy a cookie or buy a coffee. Like, I just was so connected. Everyone I knew had pot on them constantly. Everyone had like a joint in their cigarette case. Everyone had a friend who was a dealer, a mid-level dealer. It was the easiest thing in the world for me to get my hands on. It never entered my mind for a split second that God could keep me from it. That, like I said, I laughed at God without knowing I was laughing at him. And I bring up the story because I feel sometimes we don't understand the scope. We don't understand the scope and capacity for God to involve himself and interject himself in our lives, to mess up our plans, to change the trajectory of a weekend or a day or a lifetime. And God is so powerful and so competent and so able. Believe you me, if you've been getting away with something, it's not because God can't intervene. It's not because God is unaware of what you're doing. It's nothing like that. If you have been, getting away with anything, if God has been allowing that to happen, believe you me, he knows full well. And at any point in the game, he can choose to interject himself and to put a complete end to whatever it is you're doing that you think you can do behind his back, or that he's green lit because you haven't been caught yet, right? That is absolute foolishness. Don't be like Sarah, who laughed at God. Don't be like me, who laughed at God. Don't think you can laugh at God, because you can't. He's gonna have the last laugh, always and forever. He is a holy, perfect God. He knows what's going on. If he's letting something slide, then you are just living under his mercy for the moment, and he could stop that at any time. So I want to leave you with this thought. God knows all. God sees all. And God is more than capable to get involved and interject into your life, into your hobbies, into your habits, into your 5-year plan. So I would suggest to you, as a Christian, I have been a Christian for about 30 years now. Don't be deceived. Don't be deceived. Know that God knows, and God has a plan for you to get out of what you're in. If you feel he's oblivious to your pain or your troubles or your bad behavior, just know that God has a plan to move forward in a way that will absolutely be best for you. And at the end of the day, what does the scripture say? God cannot be mocked. God cannot be mocked. So again, if you're thinking that God is too busy governing the world to get involved in your personal life, I can tell you he's not too busy. He's got all the time in the world. I hope this message encourages you. And if you have a friend who gets high every weekend, maybe like my old friend in high school, maybe even just as a one-off, you got to get down on your hands and knees and pray real hard for that not to happen. Even if it's just for one, I went back the following weekend getting high. Like the point was proven. The point was God is like, Natalie, I can stop this anytime I want. I can. The point was proven. I did not become a Christian right away. I became a Christian about a year and a half after this event, but God showed me in unmistakable terms that he has all the power and all the capacity to intervene anytime he wants. That's it. I just wanted to leave you guys with this thought. There'll be more videos like this. Some will be more theological, some will be more testimonial, and some will be more about ethics and morals. I hope you enjoyed this channel, and I'll be uploading a video once a week. My name is Natalie, and this has been Clarified.